How's it going, everybody? Hopefully we're all enjoying our Tuesday. I'm titling this The Lineage of the Hammer and the Anvil Tactic. Through whispers we govern, through the elements we obscure. We are the remembered, we are the returned. We are the Whispers. I like that intro. I've grown quite fond of it. So I'm going to be beginning this video with Mars opposition Saturn interpreted as where there's a will, there's a way, leading into a quick touch on war tactics used in ancient Greek days. Now, this video interpretation is going to be similar to like yesterday's story, but it's going to be from an interpreted analytical standpoint, euphemistically delivered with a strategy most commonly used by Alexander the Great. I like studying historical figures and the rise to power. It's quite interesting. The methods, the tactics, the psychology behind their moves, and astrological role in their strategic thinking. Now, the hammer and anvil tactic is a military strategy where one force, the anvil, pins down the enemy, while another force, the hammer, attacks from the side or the rear, trapping and destroying the enemy. This tactic relies on coordinated movements, timing, and the element of surprise to be effective. The anvil is typically a more stationary and defensive force that holds the enemy in place, could be a line of infantry, a fortified position, and even a natural obstacle. The hammer is a more mobile force, whereas the cavalry or flanking unit that strikes the enemy from a different direction while they are engaged with the anvil, or distraction. With Mars trine Uranus, we can signify a strong psychological depth and capacity for navigating these intense emotions and experience, leading into how this tactic works. Now, how it works is the anvil engages the enemy, preventing them from advancing or retreating. The hammer then strikes the enemy's flank or rear, creating a pincer movement, almost, if you will. This pincer movement traps the enemy, making them vulnerable to attack from multiple directions. The hammer and anvil tactic is a powerful military strategy, but like any tactic, it does have its weaknesses that can be exploited by a prepared enemy or someone who's seen the last chapter before seeing the first. With Mars opposition Neptune, we can see the potential conflict, and with drive and ambition in the opposing, we can see the vulnerability to disruption and coordination failures. With complexity and timing, successfully executing a hammer and anvil maneuver requires precise coordination and timing between the hammer, the attacking force, and the anvil, the holding force. Any disruption in communication, misjudgment of enemy movements, or terrain obstacles can lead to a breakdown in coordination and leave both the hammer and the anvil vulnerable. This happens most common when things operate outside of parameters or exist outside of limitations or expectations or preconceived notions that once were viewed. We also have poor hammer positioning. If the hammer unit is poorly positioned or gets caught off guard, it might be defeated before it can effectively strike the enemy's flank, leaving the anvil force overwhelmed. When we counter-exploit the anvil, we can break the anvil. A strong enemy can attempt to breach or break through the anvil's force before the hammer can complete its maneuver. If the anvil is defeated, the hammer can be left isolated and vulnerable to a concentrated attack. Being a bigger anvil, if the enemy has a larger or more robust force, they can simply hold firm and endure the hammer and the anvil. Basically, being a lightning rod to BS and collecting the energies along the way and channeling that, leading to a exponential kinetic discharge of a ripple wave, if you will. Domino. I like that reference. Turn into battle into a prolonged engagement where other factors like logistics and individual unit strengths become more important. Apply to euphemism where applicable. We have countering the hammer, counterattack, or reversing the narrative. An opponent can position reverse forces to counterattack the hammer as it attempts to envelope the enemy, effectively turning the tables on the flanking maneuver. We've also got something called the hedgehog defense. By creating a strong defense with reverses at the rear, the enemy can protect against a flanking attack and discourage the hammer from proceeding due to potentially heavy casualties or a point of no return. But this usually happens at a point of no return due to some strategist's ability to know the ending before the beginning due to a complex understanding of the physical world, whereas one might be considered functionally psychic. That is a real thing. We have risks for the attacker. Dividing forces. Executing a hammer and anvil requires dividing forces, which can be risky if the enemy has superior numbers or is able to concentrate their forces at a vulnerable point in the attacker's line. This can also be layered into the physical or spiritual world as well. But one must also not interpret what seems to be a weakness as a strategic defense and distraction. Overextension. If the hammer force drives too deep into enemy territory without securing its flanks or supply lines, it can become isolated and vulnerable to encirclement and defeat. We've got enemy resolve. If the enemy is surrounded and has no escape, they might fight with increased ferocity, leading to a more costly victory for the attacker, which in terms of psychological warfare, this would be an ideal situation. It's almost like removing their mask and forcing them to act natural in their very most organic state of being. And then finally, exploiting the enemy's intentions, anticipating the trap, finding patterns, recognizing triggers or fabricated scenarios, and staged events, I guess would be proper. If the enemy can predict the hammer and anvil tactic, they can take steps to avoid or counter, such as maneuvering their forces out of the trap before it closes or aggressively attacking the center of the attacker's line if it is weakened. With the Mars trine Pluto positioning, we can interpret this as courage, motivation, and power as seen through historical use of such tactics, including, again, Alexander the Great, one of my favorite leaders. He used his cavalry as a hammer to break enemy formations, driving them into his infantry anvil. We have Hannibal at the Battle of Cannae. His infantry formed a concave anvil while his cavalry and light infantry delivered the hammer blow from the flanks. We've got the Mongol Empire, whose armies were highly skilled in using the hammer and anvil tactic, often encircling their enemies and overwhelming them with superior mobility and coordination. We have Operation Uranus in World War II. The Soviets used this tactic to encircle the Germans' 6th Army at the Stalingrad. With today's Pluto square in Chiron, we could see key aspects for success for embracing transformation and healing within. We have precise coordination. The hammer and anvil must act in concert with the hammer striking at the right moment to maximize its impact. We've got mobility and positioning. The hammer needs to be able to move quickly and decisively to flank the enemy, while the anvil needs to hold its position effectively. This isn't a time to get sucked up in your ego, because when we're in ego, we make mistakes. And when we make mistakes, boy, do we get sloppy. We've got discipline and timing. Soldiers, any good soldier, whether you're military or just self-disciplined, they must be disciplined enough to maintain their positions and execute their roles with precise timing. Precision and timing are imperative on any level for anything. We've got the overall gist of this is the hammer typically represents being proactive and decisive versus the anvil representing passivity and reactivity. Goethe famously wrote about this predicament in his greatest work, Faust, where the character Faust made a choice between a life of inaction and despair or a life of action and fulfillment. Once we embrace transformation or evolution, my theme of constants, we might begin to heal. Be successful, expand exponentially through the energies like Mars, Pluto, Chiron, Jupiter. If we know how to successfully channel these things into our body and alchemize them to externalize those internal forces. I've got Mars with the number 23 coming through as Psalms 2, verse 3. This verse highlights the futility of resisting God's ultimate authority and the consequences of such rebellion. The number 23 also represents the unknown and the devil. Now, the devil signifies a feeling of being bound, controlled, often by unhealthy habits, material desires, destructive relationships. Materialism and hedonism can also represent a strong focus on worldly pleasures, potentially to the detriment of spiritual or emotional well-being. We've got temptation and desire. The cord may highlight the presence of seductive forces or unhealthy desires that could lead to negative consequences if indulged in uncheckment. We've got shadow self. The devil can also be a prompt to confront and acknowledge the darker, unacknowledged aspects of one's own personality known as the shadow self. On the alternative, we have the positive aspects. The devil energy isn't always intrinsically bad. Again, I value dualism, so there is good and bad in everything. I view both sides of the blade. So it's a curse and a blessing, truly, it really is, because I can see the positives and the negatives in almost every aspect of life. I've trained my brain to analyze everything from multiple perspectives, variations, allegorically, acrostically, philosophically, mathematically, scientifically, business, commercial, and consumer-wise in terms of context. So I view things on a multitude of levels to determine any deviations, potential variabilities that one may incur, endure, and or observe. I like to plan ahead, always, with everything, no matter what it is. As crazy as it is, I usually follow my intuition for things that take me on crazy paths. So anyways, we've got passion and drive. The devil can represent intense passion and a strong desire to achieve goals, facing fears and liberation. It can symbolize the recognition and confrontation of one's fears and a subsequent journey towards freedom and personal growth. We've got breaking free. The devil can suggest a potential for breaking free from negative patterns, addictions, or limiting beliefs. The devil being you being in your own way. Self-limitation is a devil in itself. It always is. You are always your own worst enemy, especially when we're in the ego and not the logical aspect or the service. Not the service like military, service like just helping other people. Not targeting, dismantling, isolating, and weaponizing fears, traumas, and any known triggers against said people. That's a no-no in spiritual realm. In the Ars Goetia, the 23rd demon of Solomon is Aim, also spelled Aym or Haborim. Aim holds the rank of Duke and commands 26 legions of spirits. He is depicted as a man with 3 heads, one of a man, one of a cat, and one of a serpent. Aim is said to be able to set cities ablaze with his torch and can make individuals answer any questions honestly, incepting, if you will, and being compelling by nature and a gaze. He's also described as a charismatic figure who can enhance the wit and intelligence of those who seek his influence. Reference sites for these, I use Google and Safari, people. It's not that complex. I just kind of put this stuff together, again, on the whim. I do all my scripts. The day that I make the videos is the day that I write it, and I usually write it about an hour before I pitch the video. I do it while I'm working out. I multitask. I'm not a fan of multitasking, but I have been making everything a training aspect for me, whereas I am sharpening the mind while detaching from autonomous functions of the body as to manually override my internal systems to elevate my capabilities without that autonomous stop or emergency stop button. I'm overriding that and pushing my limits. Now, with the way the lines were drawn in the planets connecting on the astrological circle, I saw Dagas as a rune of the day. Now, in Tagalog, Sagad has several meanings. Dagas backwards, spelled with an S, whatever. It's relevant, trust me. Reaching or touching the bottom, figuratively reaching the limit of self-control. Penetrating or reaching to the other side. Broke or penniless in a colloquial sense. Sunk to the hilts, describing blades in their sheaths, having reached the end, such as the end of a kite's string. Fully tired or exhausted, used up. Used up for sure, for some. Or exhausted. Common, describing something as typical or ordinary. At the height of fame, success, etc. A snare for catching birds or fowl, also referring to the act of catching them using a snare. Again, apply to euphemisms where applicable. As as that was the so below, the as above on the alternative if you're on the dharmic aspect of life. The Dagas rune often translate as day or dawn, symbolizing awakening, enlightenment, and transformation. It represents the shift from darkness to light, signifying new beginnings, positive change, and the potential for growth. Dagas is also associated with clarity, awareness, and the integration of opposites, like day and night, life and death. Again, everything is balanced. That's all there ever was. That's all there ever is. That's all there ever will be, no matter how far the scales get tipped. They will always even out, because Anubis and Aman are hungry beings, and those entities have come through, and Athena will be calling that judgment shortly, I'm sure, for certain situations. I digress. Again, the theme of today's video was the Anvil and the Anvil tactic. It has been a strategy used since the days of the ancient Greeks, and you can apply these metrics even everyday situations if you look at it from a philosophical point of view. Again, intellectual sparring, you can use these on so many different levels and communicate things like on so many different layers. It's becoming a hobby of mine. I'm enjoying it, but yeah, hopefully you guys found this entertaining and interesting. I'll see you in the next one.